Hey, welcome to After She Left. Stay till the end and don't forget to subscribe. Saturday mornings in Glen Haven, Ohio were usually quiet. Our street had the same hush it always did, the slow rise of sun, the faint creak of old houses waking up. I was at the kitchen table sorting through a pile of digital recordings on an ancient tablet I dug out from the hall closet. My name's Ray and I'm 42. My niece, Maddie, had asked me to help her with a school project. Something about family history, weaving together stories and sounds from our last road trip to Utah. I'd figured it would be a relaxing way to spend the morning, reliving those long drives and silly moments when we'd all crammed into the car, stopping every few miles for gas station snacks. The tablet was finicky, freezing up every now and then, but I was patient, tapping and swiping through audio files with random names: Desert Rain, Zion Morning, Elise Laughs. Most of them were just short, sweet bits of laughter, or Maddie asking a question about cactus or cliffs. Then I found a file I didn't recognize. The label was just a jumble of numbers and the date from 2 months ago. Odd, since we hadn't been anywhere special since the trip. My curiosity got the better of me. I tapped play. Elise's voice filled the room, low and warm, the way she sounded when she thought no one else was around. There was laughter in it, that familiar breathy giggle I'd always loved. But then a man's voice, not mine, joined hers, gentle and close. "Come here, babe," he said. My stomach flipped. Elise's soft laugh followed, and there was the sound of a bed creaking, sheets shifting. She said, "Oh, babe," in a tone I'd never heard her use for me. I stopped the recording, my thumb hovering over the pause button like it was something hot. My heart was pounding. My wife, Elise, calling another man babe. My head felt foggy, but the recording was clear as day. No background noise of a party, no hint of a crowded restaurant. Just a quiet room, the crackle of a fire maybe, and that low hum of a cabin heater, the kind of place she'd always said was her dream getaway. I remembered that weekend she'd told me she was going to a spa retreat in the mountains, said she needed time to herself. I'd even offered to come along, but she'd laughed and told me it was a solo thing, a chance to unwind. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She'd kissed my forehead, promised she'd be back by Sunday evening, and that was that. Now, that laugh felt like a lie. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, set the tablet down on the table so carefully it was like I thought it might explode. My hands felt cold and clammy. The dog, Murphy, padded over to me, his nails clicking on the tile floor, but I barely noticed. My whole world had shrunk to that short clip, the sound of Elisa's laughter and that stranger's voice, a voice that didn't belong in our life. For a second, I told myself it had to be a mistake. Maybe it was old, maybe it wasn't what it sounded like. But the date was right there, and the background noise, that cabin heater hum, matched exactly what Elise had said about the spa retreat. 2 months ago. 2 months ago, she'd come home with rosy cheeks and that soft smile like she'd spent the weekend in blissful peace. She'd kissed me at the door, asked how Murphy had been. We'd eaten leftover pizza and watched old movies like nothing had ever happened. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. I stood up, my chair scraping the tile, and walked over to the sink to splash water on my face. It didn't help. The recording was still echoing in my head. Elise's giggle, the other man's soft murmur, my wife with someone else. While I was home, thinking she was out there taking care of herself, the morning light streaming through the window felt wrong, too bright for what I just heard. My whole body was buzzing with questions. How long had this been going on? Who was that man? Why hadn't I seen it? My brain spun in circles, trying to piece together every odd moment, every smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I looked at the tablet again, like it might have changed. But it hadn't. The file was still there, sitting in that dusty archive of memories, taunting me. I didn't know what to do next. All I knew was that I'd stumbled on something that would never fit back into place, like a puzzle piece that didn't belong in the picture I thought I was living. Outside, birds were singing, the world going on like nothing had happened. But for me, everything had just cracked open. That night, I couldn't get the recording out of my head. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Elisa's face, heard her soft laugh from that audio file. I tried to tell myself it had to be some sort of misunderstanding, that maybe she'd explain it and this whole thing would turn out to be nothing. But deep down, I didn't really believe that. We were sitting across from each other at dinner. I'd made baked salmon, the kind she always said she loved. She was scrolling through her phone, half smiling at some recipe she'd found online. For a moment, it almost felt normal. "Elise," I said, my voice quiet. She looked up, blinking like she was startled. "There's something I need to ask you." She set her phone down and gave me that practiced smile. "What is it?" I hesitated, my throat dry. "I found an audio recording today," I said, "from 2 months ago. You were laughing with someone. You called him Babe." Her face didn't even flicker at first. She just tilted her head and said, "Oh, that? It was probably from that team building retreat I did for work." She laughed, a soft, forced little laugh. "We did these improv exercises to break the ice. You know how it is. Someone starts a skit, everyone joins in." I stared at her. "Improv exercises? You said it was a solo spa retreat." She waved her hand like she was shooing away a fly. "It was, mostly. But there was this workshop, leadership skills, some nonsense about building trust. We had to pair up and act out these silly scenes. That's probably what you heard." She said it so casually, like it was no big deal, like she'd practiced the story in the mirror. For a second, I almost wanted to believe her. I wanted to grab onto that lie and let it wash everything else away. But something in her eyes was too smooth, too polished. I'd known Elise for 8 years. I knew when she was spinning a story. "Elise," I said slowly, "this recording didn't sound like a work thing. You were in a cabin somewhere. It didn't sound like a group activity." She took a sip of wine, her nails tapping the glass. "Ray, come on. You're overthinking this. It was just a game. Everyone was paired off. We were told to act like we were dating, to get comfortable on camera. It's supposed to build confidence." She let out a soft chuckle. "You know how these corporate workshops are. Cringe, but harmless." I nodded slowly, but my gut twisted. "So why didn't you mention it before?" Her smile turned tight. "Because I didn't think it mattered. It was silly and embarrassing. I didn't want to drag you into it." She set down her glass, her tone shifting to something sharper. "Ray, I know you're a worrier, but honestly, this is nothing. Are you really going to get worked up over some stupid team-building game?" I opened my mouth, but the words caught in my throat. She leaned forward, her eyes locking on mine. "I'm serious, Ray. You're making this into something it's not. It's starting to feel controlling." I sat back, feeling like I'd been punched in the chest. "I'm not trying to control you," I said, my voice shaking. I need to know the truth." She rolled her eyes, like she'd heard this all before. "The truth is you're being paranoid. You found one out-of-context recording, and now you're accusing me of, what, cheating? That's ridiculous." Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it now, a bite. She picked up her fork and went back to her dinner, like the conversation was over. I watched her eat, feeling like I was looking at a stranger. My hands felt heavy in my lap. I wanted to keep pushing, to make her admit that there was more to it. But something about the way she shut me down, the way she flipped it back on me, made me feel like I was the problem. It stopped me cold. For the rest of the meal, she acted like nothing had happened. She asked me about Maddie's project, about whether I'd called my mom that week. She even laughed at a joke I made, like we were just another happy couple eating dinner together. But I couldn't stop hearing that recording in my head. Her laughter, her soft babe, the way she sounded like she meant it. And I couldn't stop seeing how easily she lied to me, how she turned the blame back on me without a second thought. When dinner was over, she got up and started clearing plates, humming under her breath like everything was fine. I sat there, my hands still on the table, my mind racing. Was this the first time she'd lied to me? Or just the first time I'd caught her? I didn't know, but I knew one thing for sure. Nothing about this felt harmless. The next week felt like living in a dream I couldn't wake up from. Everything looked the same on the surface. Elise still made coffee in the mornings, still left notes for me on the fridge about groceries or work. But underneath it all, there was a different kind of tension, something thick and heavy that never seemed to let up. I noticed the changes in her first. Little things at first, so small I might have missed them if I wasn't already on edge. She'd spend an extra 20 minutes in front of the mirror, fussing with her hair and makeup like she was getting ready for something more than a run to the grocery store. She started wearing perfume she never wore around me, some sweet, floral scent I didn't recognize. It It wasn't the cheap stuff from the drugstore either. This was expensive, the kind of fragrance you save for someone special. She told me she was joining a new book club on Tuesday nights, said she needed more adult conversation, a break from work and family talk. I wanted to believe her, so I nodded, even though she wouldn't say what book they were reading. That night, she came home late, hours after she said she'd be back. Her face was flushed, her eyes bright. She smelled like that perfume, and I knew without asking that it wasn't for me. She curled up next to me on the couch and kissed my cheek like everything was normal, but her phone buzzed in her pocket the second she sat down. She silenced it so fast I almost didn't see the screen. Almost. The text flashed in bright white letters for just a second. Miss you tonight. C. I didn't say anything. I didn't even flinch. I just smiled, let her rest her head on my shoulder, and felt my heart crack open a little more. The next day, she said she was going to meet a friend for brunch. It's just Stacy, she said. You remember Stacy from the office, right? I nodded, but I couldn't remember if Stacy even existed. Elise was always good at names, at making stories sound just real enough to pass. When she was gone, I did something I'd never done before. I checked her phone. She'd changed the password. It was locked now, something it had never been in all our years together. That told me everything I needed to know. After that, I started paying attention to the details. The way she hesitated when I asked how her day went. The way she'd smile too wide, like she was trying too hard to sell the lie. I kept telling myself I'd ask her outright, that I'd demand the truth. But I couldn't. Every time I tried, the words died in my throat. I didn't want to see the truth spelled out in black and white. At night, I lay awake, listening to the sounds of the house, the soft creak of the floors, the hum of the fridge. She'd be next to me, breathing slow and even, like she didn't have a care in the world. But I could feel the space between us, a gap that seemed to widen every time she said, I love you, and I forced myself to say it back. One night, I got up to get a glass of water. As I passed her purse, I saw the edge of a receipt poking out. I pulled it free and read it by the kitchen light. A fancy wine bar on the other side of town. 2 glasses of red, a charcuterie board, and a dessert for 2. All charged to her card on a Wednesday night when she said she was working late. I folded the receipt and slipped it back where I found it. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the glass when I filled it. She was good at hiding things, better than I ever would have guessed. But I was starting to see the cracks. The nights she came home smelling like someone else, the sudden coldness in her touch, the way she looked at her phone when she thought I wasn't watching. Every day, I felt like I was drowning in those little inconsistencies. And every night, I lay next to her, pretending I still believed every word she said. But I didn't. Not anymore. By the end of that week, the feeling in my gut had grown too strong to ignore. I'd been giving Elise the benefit of the doubt for too long, but everything around me said she wasn't telling the truth. I started paying closer attention to her, not just the words she said, but the things she didn't. The way her eyes darted away when I asked a simple question. The tight smile that looked more like a mask. On a rainy Wednesday morning, I decided to look at the joint bank account. It wasn't something I usually did. Elise handled most of the bills, and I trusted her. But that trust was starting to feel like a cracked window I'd been ignoring for years. I pulled up the statements on my laptop and stared at them, my fingers cold against the keyboard. There were new expenses I didn't recognize, $100 here, $200 there. High-end boutique purchases, private rideshare charges late at night, dinners at restaurants we'd never gone to together, and a hotel bar charge on a random Thursday. My throat went dry. She'd told me she was at the office that night, working late on a presentation. I sat back in my chair, the numbers swimming in front of my eyes. My pulse was racing, my breath coming fast. It felt like I'd been punched in the chest. I didn't even know where to start. Every line on that statement felt like a breadcrumb leading to a place I didn't want to see. That night, I tried to bring it up. I waited until after dinner, until we were sitting in the living room pretending to watch some mindless show. I said it as carefully as I could. Hey, I noticed a couple of charges on the account, like that hotel bar charge. Do you remember that? Elise didn't even blink. Oh, that? It was probably something with the office, a networking thing, you know? Everyone was out, and I didn't want to be rude. Her tone was light, but I saw the flicker in her eyes. The same flicker I'd seen 100 times in the past few weeks, that split second where she was scrambling to find the right lie. I forced myself to smile, but my stomach was in knots. "Sure," I said, even though it didn't make sense. Even though I knew she was lying, she moved closer, resting her hand on my leg, and said, "Ray, you've got to stop worrying about these things. You're starting to sound obsessive." The way she said it made me feel small, like I was the one who was crazy. But I wasn't. I knew what I'd seen. That Friday, she said she was going out for a colleague's birthday dinner. She wore that perfume again, and she fussed with her hair for nearly an hour. When she left, she kissed my cheek and told me not to wait up. I watched her pull out of the driveway, her taillights glowing red in the rain. I didn't wait up, but I didn't stay home either. I grabbed my jacket and my keys and followed her car out of town. I kept a distance, my heart hammering the whole time, feeling like I was doing something dirty, but I had to know. I had to see it for myself. She drove out to the edge of town, past the gas stations and diners, to a stretch of road that curved around an old lake. I parked a little ways back and watched her car turn into a small cabin parking lot, the kind of place where no one would ask questions. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped my phone. I watched her walk up to the cabin door, her head down, her hair tucked behind her ears like she was trying to hide. She knocked once, twice, and a man answered. He pulled her inside so fast it made my stomach lurch. The door closed behind them and the cabin went quiet. I sat there for a long time, the rain tapping on the windshield like a metronome. My mind was blank and racing at the same time. I wanted to storm in there to grab her by the shoulders and demand the truth. But I didn't. I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me upright. An hour later, I drove home. The roads were slick, the wipers squeaking across the glass. I parked in the driveway and sat in the car for a while, staring at my own reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked like a ghost, pale, hollow-eyed, older than I'd felt in years. By the time Elise came home, I was sitting on the couch, a beer in my hand, pretending like nothing had happened. She smelled like rain and perfume when she walked in, her cheeks pink from the cold. She smiled at me, and for a moment, I almost believed her. But I'd seen the truth. And no matter how many sweet smiles she gave me, I knew there was no coming back from that. Elise didn't notice anything different when she got home that Sunday evening. She dropped her bag by the door and gave me a quick smile. The same practiced smile she'd been using for weeks. She moved around the kitchen like she owned it, checking the fridge, complaining about how I hadn't stocked her favorite yogurt. She didn't see how every word she said bounced off me like I was made of stone. I'd been thinking about it all weekend, how to end it, how to cut her out clean. I didn't want a scene. I didn't want the shouting or the tears. I just wanted to be done. A couple of weeks earlier, I'd slipped a set of legal documents into the pile of papers she signed for some home insurance update. A separation agreement buried under the small print and jargon she never bothered to read. I'd worked it out with an old buddy of mine who used to handle contracts for the shipyard. No drama, no fighting, just a signature that meant I could walk away. When she finally noticed the papers waiting for her on the table, she blinked like she didn't understand. "Ray," she said, her voice careful. "What's this?" I took a breath. "It's what you wanted," I said quietly. "A fresh start." She picked up the pages and started reading, her lips moving as she scanned the lines. "You're serious," she said after a moment, her voice going flat. "You're actually doing this." "I am," I said, my hands folded calmly in my lap. "I've already filed them with the clerk. All you have to do is sign them, and we're done." Her face went pale. "Ray, this isn't what I meant. We're just going through a rough patch. Don't you think you're overreacting?" I shook my head. "You made your choice a long time ago," I said. "This is just me making mine." She threw the papers down and stood up fast, her chair scraping against the tile. "So that's it? You're just going to walk away? After everything?" I kept my eyes on hers, steady and calm. "You walked away first," I said softly. "I'm just following your lead." She let out a shaky laugh, the kind that sounded more like a sob. "You're so cold, Ray. You always have been. It's like you don't even care." I shrugged. I did care, but I'm done pretending this is something it's not. For a minute, she didn't say anything. She just stood there, breathing hard, her eyes darting around the room like she was looking for something to hold on to. Finally, she let out a long sigh and slumped back into her chair. "You're making a huge mistake," she said in a small voice. "You're going to regret this." I leaned back, my shoulders relaxing for the first time in months. "No, Elise," I said. "I think this is the first thing I've done in years that I won't regret." She didn't sign right away. She flipped through the pages like she was hoping to find some loophole, some line that would let her turn the blame back on me. But there wasn't one. I'd made sure of it. When she finally picked up the pen and signed, she did it in quick, angry strokes. No tears, no apology. When it was done, she pushed the papers back across the table and stood up. "You're going to be sorry," she said, her voice cold. "You think you're so righteous, but you're just running away." I nodded slowly. "Maybe I am," I said, "but at least I'm not lying to myself anymore." She stared at me for a long moment, like she was waiting for me to say something else. But I didn't. I watched her walk to the door, grab her coat, and leave without another word. A couple of days later, I packed up my things and moved into a small apartment by the docks. The place was old and smelled like salt and oil, but it was mine. No fancy furniture, no designer candles, just a place to start over. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't need to. I think I'd been living like a ghost in my own house for a long time, and now I was finally free. At night, I'd lie in bed and listen to the distant sound of water slapping against the pier, the quiet clink of rigging in the wind. It was a different kind of silence. Not the cold, empty quiet of our house, but something open and clean, a blank page. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe that was enough. The days after I left felt like wading through fog. My new apartment was a tiny box overlooking the water. A single bed, a rickety old table, and a view of the docks where the fishing boats came and went. But it was mine. No half-truths in the walls, no perfume I didn't recognize hanging in the air, just salt and diesel and the quiet hush of the tide. At first, I didn't know what to do with myself. I spent my mornings walking along the docks, watching the gulls fight over fish scraps. My hands itched for something to hold, something to fix. But there was nothing. No broken sink, no leaky faucet, no honey-do list waiting for me on the fridge. One afternoon, I found myself at the old boathouse workshop. It had been years since I'd set foot in there. The door was half off its hinges, the wood weathered and cracked. But when I pushed it open, the smell of sawdust and engine grease hit me like a memory. My dad used to bring me here when I was a kid, and back when the boathouse was still alive with the sound of hammering and laughter. I spent the first couple days just cleaning, dusting off shelves, stacking old paint cans, hauling out rusted tools that hadn't been touched in decades. I didn't have a plan. I just needed the motion, the sense of progress, even if it was small. There was an old workbench by the window, the wood scarred and stained. I ran my hands over it, feeling every nick and groove like they were old friends. I remembered how my dad used to stand there, showing me how to sand down a plank or oil a hinge until it moved smooth as silk. I'd forgotten how good it felt, that steady rhythm of work. One night, I was sitting on an overturned bucket, staring at the empty walls, when I remembered something else. When I was younger, I'd thought about teaching, not in a school, but real, hands-on work. A place where people could learn how to fix what was broken, to build something with their own two hands. It was just a dream back then, something I'd tucked away in the back of my mind. But that night, with the smell of salt air and old wood around me, it didn't feel so far-fetched anymore. The next morning, I called an old friend of mine, Ben, a retired sailor who'd always known his way around an engine. He didn't even hesitate. "You name it, Ray," he said. "I'm in." I started small. I put up a sign in the window. Forge Point. Restoration through creation. I made a few calls, put together a simple website. No fancy bells and whistles, just a promise. Learn to build, learn to fix. Bring your boat, your skiff, your busted fishing gear, and we'll teach you how to make it whole again. Word spread fast in a town like Glen Haven. People were curious. A couple of kids from the high school stopped by one afternoon asking if I'd teach them how to sand down an old canoe their dad had left in the shed. An older guy from down the street brought in a battered rowboat, hoping to patch it up in time for the summer. Each day, the workshop felt a little more alive. I didn't think about Elise much during those first weeks. I didn't let myself. My hands were busy, my mind focused on the work. It was easier that way. But sometimes in the quiet moments, when I was sanding down a plank or fitting a hinge, her face would flash in my mind, and I'd feel that old ache in my chest. I'd push it away and keep working. One evening, I was locking up for the night when I saw the sign hanging in the window. That simple promise I'd made to myself: restoration through creation. I stood there a long time, watching the way the light from the harbor shimmered off the letters, and I realized that's what I was doing, taking the pieces of a life I'd lost and building something new out of them. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a place again, a purpose. Not because someone else needed me, but because I wanted it. Because I wanted to see what I could build when I wasn't trying to hold someone else's world together. And that was enough to keep me going. A month into running Forge Point, I was starting to find a rhythm. Every Saturday, the workshop filled up with the buzz of conversation, the scrape of sandpaper, the low hum of an outboard motor someone was trying to coax back to life. There was a kind of comfort in that noise, honest work, no hidden agendas. One rainy Tuesday morning, I was nursing a cup of black coffee at the workbench when I heard the door creak open. I turned around expecting another local with a busted oar or a cracked canoe, but it wasn't someone I recognized. She was young, maybe in her early 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a messy braid and eyes that looked like they'd seen more than most people twice her age. She wore a faded denim jacket, rain still dripping from the shoulders. She didn't look nervous, just determined. "Hi," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I'm Cass Maddox. I saw the flyer in the library." I nodded slowly. "You here to sign up for the Saturday course?" She hesitated for a second, then met my eyes. "Yeah," she said. I want to learn how to fix things, work with my hands." There was a pause. She shifted her weight like she was about to say more, then stopped herself. I waited. Finally, she took a deep breath. "I know who you are," she said quietly. "I know about everything, about your wife, about the man she was with." For a second, the workshop seemed to go silent. My heart thumped once, hard and loud, and then settled into a slow, steady beat. I didn't say anything. I just waited. Cass swallowed, her shoulders squaring up like she was bracing for a punch. "The man from the recording, he's my father," she said. Colin Maddox." The name was a blow, even though I'd never heard it out loud before. I'd never wanted to. But it fit. The stranger in the recording, the man I'd seen through the window of that cabin. My hands tightened around my coffee cup, but I didn't let my face give anything away. Cass went on, her voice low. "I'm not here because of that. I'm not here to stir things up. I want to learn. I'm trying to build something for myself away from all of that." I took a slow breath and set down the cup. "Why here?" I asked quietly. She didn't look away. "Because I know what it's like to have something break," she said, "and I want to know how to put it back together." For a long moment, we just looked at each other. I could see the shadows in her eyes, the same kind of hollow ache I'd been carrying for months, and I realized I believed her. She wasn't here for revenge or to dig up old ghosts. She was here for herself. I gave a slow nod. "All right," I said. "Here's how it works. You show up on time. You put in the effort, no drama, no excuses. You clear?" She nodded, her jaw set. "Clear." I picked up a registration form and slid it across the workbench. "Fill that out. We start at 8 sharp on Saturday." As she bent her head to write, I watched her, something easing in my chest I hadn't even realized was tight. Cass Maddox, the daughter of the man who'd broken my marriage, was going to learn how to build something real here. When she was done, she pushed the paper back to me. "Thank you," she said quietly. I nodded. "See you Saturday." As she left, the door swung shut behind her with a soft click. I sat back in my chair, the rain still drumming steady on the roof. I didn't know what this would mean or what would come next. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let the past define me, or this place, any longer. And that was enough to start. The first Saturday, Cass showed up early. She stood just inside the door, her denim jacket soaked through from the morning drizzle. She gave me a nod, then set her bag down by the workbench and waited. There was no small talk, no nervous chatter, just a quiet, focused look in her eyes that reminded me of how I felt the first time I picked up a wrench. I started the morning by laying out the basics: safety, respect, and the promise that if you put in the work, you'd leave with something that worked. I kept it simple. I didn't want to talk about the past, hers or mine. Cass proved herself fast. She wasn't the kind of person to stand around waiting for instruction. She listened carefully, watched what I showed her, and then got right to it. No complaints, no excuses. By the end of the day, she had stripped the paint off an old skiff we'd pulled from the back lot, sanding it down smooth and even. "You've done this before," I said, not quite a question. She shook her head. "No, but I want to know how." I believed her. The workshop started to take on a life of its own. Word had gotten around town, and soon we had a handful of regulars: a disabled veteran named Tom, who wanted to restore the rowboat his brother left behind; a kid named Jamie, 14, trying to fix up his father's canoe that had been left to rot in the garage. Every Saturday, the room filled up with the sound of tools and laughter, the scent of sawdust and old varnish. There was no sign on the door saying what we were doing, no promises of redemption or fresh starts, but somehow that's what it became. One afternoon, I was showing Jamie how to seal a seam when I saw Cass in the corner of my eye, watching me. There was something like respect in her expression, but also something else, a kind of hunger, like she was searching for something she hadn't found yet. During the breaks, Cass would ask questions, the kind that told me she wasn't here for some quick fix. She wanted to understand how it all worked, from the smallest rivet to the way wood grain could shift with the seasons. I found myself showing her things I hadn't thought about in years: the subtle angle of a plane, the patience it took to heat bend a plank without splitting it. For me, it wasn't just about teaching her. It was about remembering what it felt like to take pride in something again, to build something solid that would last. One rainy evening after class, Cass lingered by the door as the others packed up. "You really think people can fix themselves the way we fix these boats?" she asked, her voice soft. I thought about that for a moment. "I think we can learn to live with the cracks," I said, "and sometimes that's enough." She gave a small, almost sad smile. "That's what I'm hoping for." As the weeks went on, Forge Point became more than just a workshop. It was a place where people came to figure out what was broken and how to make it right again, even if it wasn't perfect. We patched holes and smoothed rough edges. We shared quiet moments over battered wood and rusty nails. And in those small, honest acts, we found something close to peace. I didn't know what the future held for Cass or for me. But every Saturday, when I saw her at the workbench, sleeves rolled up, brow furrowed in concentration, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. And that was enough to keep going. By late summer, Forge Point had become something of a fixture in Glen Haven. We weren't flashy, just a simple sign in the window and the quiet murmur of tools in use. But word had spread that it was more than just a workshop. It was a place to learn, to rebuild, to put your hands on something real. Of course, not everyone was happy about that. One afternoon, I was wiping down the workbench when Cass walked in, her face tight. She didn't say anything at first, just pulled off her jacket and rolled up her sleeves like she always did. But I could tell something was different. "Everything okay?" I asked, setting the rag aside. She hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, just some noise." She didn't have to say it outright. I knew what she meant. Elise had never been the type to stay quiet for long. Lately, I'd heard from a couple of old friends that she'd been posting on the local forums, hinting at rumors about me and the workshop. Whispers about how I was using Forge Point to get back at her, how it was all some elaborate act of revenge. Cass must have seen the doubt in my eyes. She gave me a small smile, tired but steady. "I told her to stop," she said. "I told her I didn't want any part of it, that she can keep her games to herself." It was the first time she'd mentioned her mother by name in weeks. She didn't say it with anger, just quiet resolve. Like she'd already made her peace. Later that day, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. When I picked up, a man's voice spoke, low and direct. "Ray, this is Colin Maddox." I felt my grip tighten around the phone, but my voice stayed calm. "What do you want, Colin?" He let out a breath. "Look, I know things have gotten messy. Elise has been stirring up a lot of noise, and I don't want Cass caught in the middle of it." He paused as if measuring his words. "I want to buy Elise out. Any stake she might have, any claim, I'll cover it. I just want to end this." I closed my eyes for a moment. Part of me wanted to hang up, to tell him it was too late, that I didn't care what happened to him or Elise. But I thought about Cass, about the quiet way she looked at me every Saturday morning, her sleeves already rolled up before she even stepped through the door. "All right," I said finally. "If that's what it takes to put this to rest, we'll do it." He didn't say thank you, just a brief pause, then a soft, almost relieved, "Good." A few days later, the paperwork was done. Elise's name was gone from any shared records, any lingering connections. It was like cutting out the last splinter of a wound that had festered too long. When I told Cass, she didn't say much, just a small nod and a deep breath, like she was finally free of a weight she'd carried on her shoulders too long. And that was it. The last tie to Elise severed. No drama, no final showdown, just quiet finality. The workshop kept going the way it always had. The boats still needed mending, the people still needed purpose. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like the ghosts were finally fading. Not gone, maybe, but no longer in the driver's seat. I didn't know what Elise would say next, or if she'd even bother. I didn't care. She was a chapter I'd already closed. And Cass? She was building something new, right here in these four wooden walls. So was I. A few weeks after Colin's call, the workshop felt more alive than ever. Summer was winding down, but Forge Point was just hitting its stride. The sign out front, "Restoration through Creation," had never felt more true. Cass had started helping out beyond the Saturday classes. She'd show up early on Wednesdays, sweeping out the sawdust or restocking the screws and nails. She was good with the other students, patient and quick to lend a hand, even if she was still learning herself. One Saturday morning, as the sun spilled through the dusty windows, Cass pulled me aside. "Can I show you something?" she asked, her voice steady but a little nervous. "Sure," I said. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a small wooden plaque. It was simple, but the carving was careful and deliberate. Forge Point, Restoration through Creation. The letters were neat, the edges smooth. She ran her thumb over the finished wood like she was proud of every groove. "I thought the workshop could use something permanent," she said quietly. "Something to remind people what this place is about." I took it from her and turned it over in my hands. "It's perfect," I said, and I meant it. She smiled, a real smile, the first I'd seen in a while, that wasn't tinged with something sad. "I'm glad." That evening, we hung it up together, right by the door. I watched her step back and take it in, the way her shoulders squared up a little taller. In that moment, I realized what this workshop had become. Not just a place to sand down old wood or patch up broken hulls, but a place for people like Cass and me to put themselves back together, one piece at a time. Elise was gone, her presence in my life reduced to nothing but a memory. She didn't call, didn't text, I didn't expect her to. Whatever story she was telling herself now didn't matter to me. It felt like she was fading, like a bad dream I could barely remember. Cass stayed on as an assistant, helping new students, running the register, keeping the coffee pot full. She was good at it, and the workshop felt better with her there, like it was meant to be. At the first open house we held that fall, I watched her stand up in front of a room full of curious neighbors and show them how to plane down a piece of oak, her hands steady and sure. I stood back and let her take the lead, knowing she'd found something real here, just like I had. As the night wrapped up, she came over and tapped my shoulder. "Thanks, Ray," she said, "for giving me a chance." I just smiled. "You gave yourself that chance, Cass. You're the one who showed up." She nodded, and we both stood there in the doorway, watching the last of the guests head out into the cool night. The workshop was quiet, the only sound the gentle lapping of water from the nearby docks. I realized then that this place, these tools, these tired wooden walls, they weren't just an escape anymore. They were an arrival, a landing place, a testament to what could be built when you stopped trying to patch up the past and just started living in the present. Forge Point wasn't about what Elise had done or who she'd been. It wasn't even about the mistakes I'd made trying to keep a life together that had already come apart. It was about something simpler and more honest. the work you put in, the repairs you made, the lives you touched along the way. I looked around the workshop, the students laughing, the boats half finished but hopeful, and I felt something like peace. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I wasn't waiting for the next lie, the next betrayal. I was exactly where I wanted to be.